Good morning and welcome to today's online COVID-19 discrimination in our community. My name is Francisca and I am the Community Outreach Coordinator for the City of Lincoln, the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights. Today we'll be also joined by Mindy Rush-Shipman, which is the Director of the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights. The Lincoln Commission on Human Rights, or LCHR, is responsible for preventing and responding to all forms of discrimination for the City of Lincoln. We also work to assure and foster equal opportunity for all Lincoln community, for the City of the Lincoln community. Today's program is brought to you by collaborating partners, the Culture Centers of Lincoln, and it is made up of 6 culture centers in Lincoln. Joining us today will be the Asian Community and Cultural Center and El Centro de las Americas. We would like to thank Mayor Larry Gaylor Bayard for joining us today, as we are grateful for her support of today's event. And we must recognize that the work that the mayor has done in her and her office and continuing to do keep our community informed and as safe as possible during the COVID-19 public health crisis. So thank you, Mayor, for being with us this morning.
Well, thank you, Francisca, and good morning, everyone. I just appreciate the invitation to be here to just share a few quick words. I want to recognize both Francisca and Mindy for all of their work to educate community members about the services of our Commission on Human Rights and to, faithfully every day work to address instances of discrimination in Lincoln. And I really want to thank as well our cultural center leaders, not only for all the services you're providing every day to our residents, but also for your partnership and collaboration with our city. And I mean, throughout the pandemic, as we've worked to address our public health crisis, we have worked closely with the cultural centers and leaders to make sure that we are as responsive as possible to needs on the ground in our community. And that's come in so many different forms, whether it's disseminating really important health information in multiple languages, to organizing COVID-19 testing opportunities on site in the community as opposed to in drive-thrus at hospitals or at the event center. All of you have been so instrumental in enabling us to address the health and safety of every resident in our community. So thank you so much for being our true partners, and the ability to turn to you has been incredibly appreciated and remains appreciated and valued each day. The pandemic, of course, has presented unique challenges and barriers for many residents and highlighted some of the health and economic disparities that were already present in the community. It's really shined a spotlight on them. And as I have shared previously, that individuals who have tested positive with COVID-19 in Lancaster County are disproportionately likely to be racial and ethnic minorities, while white residents comprise only 35.3% of our county's total cases. We put all of that information on our website in the dashboard at covid19.lincoln.ne.gov. It's front and center and transparent so that we can continue to monitor and address those disparities. And as we've seen nationally, as well as in our community, some individuals have used myths about COVID-19 as an opportunity to discriminate and express racist sentiments against others. We, of course, are firmly committed to both condemning that and preventing and responding to all forms of discrimination against our residents. And I know that everyone here in this event today feels the same way and has that same commitment to learning more about how we can all together take action against acts of racism in our community, working towards a more inclusive and welcoming city, which is what our One Lincoln initiative is all about, but is what all of us kind of live here in this community of advocates and people working for justice. Is something that we all need to continue to do and bring more people into the fold. And I'm so grateful that you are here today to continue that work and lead by example and bring more people into the fold. So thank you again for everything you're doing to make this a better community for everyone. And with that, I turn it back to you, Francisca.
Thank you so much, Mayor, for taking the time to be with us this morning, and your words ring truth. With COVID-19 right now, we see all sorts of discrimination, all types of racism, and I think the City of Lincoln has done the best they've been able to do to ensure that we are in the know-how at the moment that things are happening. And also we've been, as Mayor said, working very hard to make sure that we bring the different languages to the community so everybody is well informed. And it's, thanks to a group of people who've been working very diligently to make sure that we bring those briefs to you in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Arabic, and Chinese. And we will continue to do so as long as it is needed. So thank you, Mayor, for being with us this morning again.
Thank you.
So starting off with our program, we want to make sure that you get the best out of this web. And so please, if you have any questions throughout this, let us know what questions you have, and we will do a short Q&A at the end of the program. So starting today, we're going to have a PowerPoint that will be presented by 3 individuals. The first one will be Mindy Rush Shipman, and she will be talking about briefly about what the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights are. So we will have that PowerPoint go ahead and be shared. And Ms. Lee, if you're ready to share that PowerPoint, that would be so awesome. Okay, and you can go to the third one, absolutely. Okay, so Mindy, thank you very much. Welcome you to our program. If you could please go ahead and start with the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights.
Great, thank you, Francisca. I just would like to echo the mayor's comments and to thank you specifically, as well as Lee Kramer, for all of your work putting this webinar together today. But to introduce our organization, the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights, we are, like Francisca mentioned, a neutral city agency, and we work to prevent and respond to instances of alleged discrimination within the city of Lincoln. We investigate allegations of discrimination that happen in the areas of employment, housing, and public accommodation. Public accommodation is if someone's denied service within the community. And then, of course, employment is anything associated with applying or keeping our benefits associated with your job. And housing is renting, buying, trying to secure financing for housing. As today is a perfect example, another big component of the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights work is education and outreach. We work hard to try to get information out to the community about our rights and responsibilities that we have within the community. And we've been working hard with the cultural centers throughout Lincoln to particularly address these rights and responsibilities in the era of COVID-19 pandemic. So with that, I will turn it back over to Francisca so she can introduce the 2 cultural centers that we've partnered with today.
Thank you, Mindy. And we'll go ahead and go with the next slide. So the next person who will be presenting is Romeo Guerra, and he will introduce himself from El Centro de las Americas.
Thank you, Francisca, and thank you everybody for putting this webinar together. I think this is a great effort to show how the city and the culture centers work together. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of what El Centro does in the community, specifically with the Latino population. Our services are basically divided into 3 broad areas. The areas are family support services, educational services, and health services. In the area of family support, we have a lot of community assistance that we provide regarding helping people sign up or register for public service, public social programs such as the SNAP and other programs provided like that. We also help a lot of our clients regarding unemployment, seeking employment, and so forth. We have a domestic violence program that it's the only one in Lincoln that provides support in Spanish, very well attended, and it has a great impact in the community. We also have entered into a contract with Nebraska Legal Aid to provide legal assistance in the areas of housing, employment, and debt. Some of the educational services we provide have been provided in the Lincoln Public Schools for a number of years, dealing with Latina youth, to keep them in school primarily, but also to help them start thinking about future educational attainment. We also provide GED classes in Spanish, which is not readily provided in other places. And we have a great citizenship program that's been going on for several years. In the area of health services, we do a lot of outreach, education. We also try to connect our clients with a primary physician, or to help them if they have a huge debt, which a lot of them seem to accumulate because, again, they don't have a primary care physician, so they go to a lot of urgent care, they go to a lot of emergency services, thus they accumulate a large debt, and we help them figure out a way to pay that off. So basically, the purpose of El Centro is to provide those basic services, but also to try and close some gaps in the education, in wealth, in the health disparities, as I mentioned, and look for affordable housing, and just provide some safe and security network for them. The last thing that I'll say is, or a couple more things that I'll say, is that we were very fortunate to receive some money through the COVID funding mechanism by the Lincoln Community Foundation. With that funding, we have provided a lot of assistance in the area of housing in terms of rent and utilities, paying off electrical bills, gas bills, water bills, and so forth. And we've also provided a significant amount of assistance with food vouchers or food gift cards and gas cards. So the last thing I will say is that generally we have a couple of fundraisers in the year. We would invite you all to participate in that. This year we were not able to have the Wine Chocolate Tango because of the COVID. However, we are planning a Latino festival this year that will be done virtually, and that will be September 13th, and that'll be from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. We will be sending out a lot of information on that. We would like all of you to participate in that. You'll have the opportunity to either sponsor, donate, or just be a part of the festival. So thank you again for the opportunity to present what El Centro is, and to reinforce that we are here to help the community at large, but specifically Latinos. And hopefully we'll get past this COVID and a lot of the negative stereotypes that have been resulted as of the COVID. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Guerra, for that presentation on El Centro. We appreciate it. And again, to kind of give you a quick overview, remember September 13th, the Latino Festival, virtual, and information will be sent out. Next on our agenda is Sheila Dorsey, the Director of the Asian Community and Cultural Center. Welcome, Sheila. We so appreciate you being here with us today. And go ahead and she'll be presenting on the Asian Community Cultural Center. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you, Francisca. Thanks for having us on the program. I'm Sheila Dorsey Vinton, the Executive Director, CEO of the Asian Center. At the Asian Center, we serve all immigrants and refugees through our programs and services. And part of our mission is also to advance the sharing of culture and the cultural heritage of our clients with the community at large. We have 6 main programs that we offer at the Asian Center. We do a lot of the same things that El Centro does. And in our women's program, we are working to make sure that women have all the information that they need to be empowered and receive domestic violence assistance in their languages and connections to community programs. We have a senior program that we're especially proud of, and we partner with other agencies in town to provide services to our seniors. So seniors have, during this COVID-19 pandemic, it's been a little difficult for them because of social isolation, and that's been one of the primary goals of our senior program, is to help seniors not be in social isolation. So we do lots of phone calls with them right now to check in on how they're doing. Our Family Resources Program is really connecting families with all the resources that they need around Lincoln that are available to them, including English classes and citizenship classes, but also like interpreting bills and mail. So, knowing if this is junk versus an important document that they need to pay attention to is really critical. Our staff speak over 13 languages in order to assist all refugees and immigrants in the community. In our youth program, we have assistance in 3 high schools called Life After High School, and that is they provide homework help, but also guidance in making future plans and thinking about the future, including assistance in writing scholarship applications and filling out the FAFSA, but also just thinking and imagining what career opportunities there are out there. We do a digital storytelling project called Untold Migrant Stories, where youth can document their lives and what's important to them to show to the community. And we also have a Yazidi youth program to celebrate cultural heritage and offer some of those similar things. In our health advocacy and outreach program, our staff work closely with doctors' offices, in particular Blue Stem Health. We've worked with them in doing home visits and making sure people have the things that they need and that they're taking their medications correctly. We help them make doctor's appointments. We provide interpretation if that's necessary as well. But also our staff are community health workers, and they understand chronic disease, and so they can provide that education to our clients about what diabetes is and how to manage it. They're diabetes educators as well. And they do mental health peer support as well. So all of our cultural centers staff have been trained in peer support and as community health workers. And this peer support is really critical at this time during COVID-19 when people are feeling isolated, and also all the stressors of life could be really significantly impacted by just the things that are happening now with COVID-19, and then also increases in discrimination and racist acts as well. So our mental health services are really important. And then their cultural education program, we definitely want to help any agencies around town understand the cultures that are present in Lincoln. So we do programs where we present to the Lincoln Police Department, for example, or nursing students and physician's assistant students, and really anybody who wants us to do a presentation on cultural diversity, we're happy to do that. But we also do festivals. So we have the Harvest Moon Festival in the fall, and the New Year Festival in the spring, early winter, and then all of the other kind of cultural education that we do, like going to schools or that sort of thing. And that sums up what we do in a, I guess, slide. Thank you, Francisca.
Oh, thank you. And with what Sheila was saying, first of all, they do have a few festivals that they do throughout the year. But then also one of the things that we wanted to kind of focus on is the stigma and some of the responses that, especially in the Asian community, they have received when it comes to discrimination. So Sheila is going to be so kind to continue with the next 2 slides and talk a little bit about what that looks like in the Asian community.
Yes. Thank you for letting us bring this to the attention of our viewers. Asian Americans and Asians in general, since January, have been increasingly experiencing significant discriminatory responses and actual racist acts. And in this slide that you can see here, we've had Asian women attacked in New York City, pushed in front of a subway, and just people acting really horrendously. And it's not just actual direct racist acts, it's also people looking at people with judgment in their eyes and saying very, very awful things. And if we think that it's somewhere else, well, and also, so in Texas, there was a family that was actually attacked with a knife, and the person who did the attacking said it was exactly because of COVID-19. And this is very terrifying for our families that live in Lincoln. And, you know, if we would like to think that it doesn't happen here, but it actually does. And if we go to the next slide, we can see that the first picture, this was in Omaha. I'm not going to repeat the slur that's on that sign, but you know, this was in Omaha, an actual business in Omaha. And our staff have experienced these acts of aggression and racism as well. One of my staff was in Target with their sister in Lincoln, and somebody came up and sneezed in the sister's face and walked away. And, you know, so this is especially disturbing during this time of COVID-19. It's a risk, but of course, the staff and her sister were terrified and just felt very, very unsafe. You know, we can't think that these things don't happen here, because they do.
Thank you, Sheila. And how horrendous. Imagine, you know, being a person has nothing to do with COVID-19 and being discriminated in this manner, being treated in this manner. It's something that if we all put ourselves into what people have gone through, this is not something that we would want to happen to us, to our family, to friends, let alone to other people. And so this is something that we want everyone to think about and to realize that, you know, sometimes we're bystanders, and we're going to touch a little bit about what you can do as a bystander. But next is, again, the director of El Centro, Romeo Guerra, and he's going to go over the next slide. Lee, if you could please. Thank you. Mr. Guerra, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to add a few things that Sheila covered really well regarding some of the myths and some of the misconceptions that people have regarding where the coronavirus and the COVID came from and the implications that it's had. You know, some things to keep in mind. For example, even though it's been sort of research that the COVID started in Wuhan, China, it was probably more likely introduced into the United States from Europe, but nobody seems to really attach that label to it. And a lot of the slurs and comments, racist comments are directed at Asian Americans or Asian. And so that's one thing to keep in mind, that it's not a virus that is endemic to a certain population. It can affect anybody. As the slide says, viruses don't hate or discriminate. They'll infect anybody that comes in contact with the virus. So I think that's something to keep in mind if you hear some derogatory comments regarding Asian Americans and the coronavirus. The other thing I should mention is that obviously Asians and Latinos have been overrepresented in the number of cases with coronavirus, but it's not because of their race. It's more because of the socioeconomic standard and status. Working in a lot of confined places, their environment at home can be not very conducive to quarantines and things like that. So the virus is more prevalent among those populations, not because of their race, but because of their socioeconomic status. Another point that you can always keep in mind is that wearing a mask does not mean that a person is ill. And also, wearing a mask actually protects the other person more than it does you. And it's a sign of respect. You're wearing that mask because I'm thinking of you, not necessarily of me as much, but more of you, and not wanting in case I have to have the virus to spread it to you. We can also interpret some of the stigma that goes along with it and try to spread more accuracy, more science than just hearsay. Last point that I think we should keep in mind is if you hear any of these misrepresentation of what's going on, or if you read discriminatory comments, we should speak up and again make those points that I just mentioned, that this is not a racial virus per se, and that wearing the mask is a sign of respect and protecting the public. It's not so much for you. So if we keep some of these things in mind and again emphasize the science of this, I think that'll go a long way. So basically respecting other people's rights.
Thank you, Mr. Guerra. This is great information. It's reiterating what we are saying all along with this program is, we cannot blame those who have nothing to do with it. It's a virus. It doesn't, they don't hate, they don't discriminate. So this affects us all, not just one community or another. It's across the board. Next will be Mindy Rashipman, the director of LCHR, and she is going to talk about the next PowerPoint and give us some great information on whether it's illegal to discriminate or what is illegal to discriminate. Lee, can you go to the next one, please?
Thank you, Francisca, and thank you, Sheila and Romeo. That was really great information. Like Sheila and Romeo mentioned, a lot of the discriminatory acts that are happening in our community are based upon misinformation, and it's not right to engage in these type of behaviors because it's not based on fact and it's dehumanizing, but it's also against the law. So this slide in particular is just meant to give a brief overview about what illegal discrimination is and how we can all identify it. Later in this presentation, we'll talk about ways to report, but this slide really just kind of gives us some tools that we can put in our tool belt on how to identify when something is discriminatory. Discrimination is defined as unequal treatment based upon a person's protected characteristics. Those protected characteristics include race, color, sex or gender, national origin or ancestry, marital status, religion, disability, age in employment discrimination cases, familial status, whether someone is living with minor children, in housing discrimination cases, and retaliation. And on the bottom of the slide, we have listed out some examples of discrimination related to the COVID-19 pandemic in particular. For example, if a business is refusing to let someone enter the business because they appear to be of Asian descent, and they're refusing entrance into this business based upon the misinformation that Romeo and Sheila talked about, this is public accommodation discrimination and it's illegal. If we're talking about the workplace or in housing, if your employer or your landlord or your housing provider is insinuating or even demanding sexual acts or favors from their employee or their tenant in order to keep that job or their apartment or their house, that is illegal, and it's illegal discrimination based upon sex or we will also cover that sometimes illegal discrimination is not just wrong and illegal under equal opportunity and fair housing laws, but it's also violating criminal laws as well. And so when you report these instances of discrimination, Lincoln Commission on Human Rights can help you navigate on what other protections you have besides the laws against discrimination. And the last example that we have here is if an individual at work or in their housing has a disability or an underlying health condition that makes them more susceptible to serious health consequences or even death if they contract the COVID-19 virus, they have the right to ask for a reasonable accommodation, and they have the right to have their employer or their housing provider work with them to make sure that they have equal opportunity to perform their job and to stay safe in their homes. So these are just 3 examples. Unfortunately, we know that COVID-19 related discrimination is happening across the country and in Lincoln. And so we'll talk about how to report those instances later. But one thing that's really important is we do not expect every community member to be able to identify when discrimination is illegal. And so we really encourage folks just to contact us. If something doesn't feel right, it's okay to contact the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights. The contact is confidential and we can help you navigate the different laws.
Thank you, Mindy. That was great information. And it might sound like a lot of information, but at the end of the program, we will be having the phone numbers for each of the agencies that are presenting today. And so please don't hesitate to contact us. So next, we're gonna play a couple of videos to kind of give you an idea of what microaggressions look like, which is in part what Romeo Guerra talked about, and then we'll kind of go from there.
My name is Zahira, I'm 19 and I'm a politics student. One example of microaggression I've experienced in the past is I've been on the bus and it'll be a packed bus to the point everyone's standing, but no one will sit next to me because they see me wearing a scarf and they see me like a terrorist or like an unfriendly person despite me smiling and just being like everyone else.
So how microaggressions feel in comparison to overt racism? In a way, you know how to deal with it better, because while obviously it's usually more aggressive, it's usually more directed, and in that sense it's a horrible feeling, but you can address it very directly. But with microaggressions, it's difficult because while it's less aggressive, there's also much less you can do about it. It's much harder to convince people that it happens or that it exists.
Oh, you're so pretty for a black girl. Oh, she has a Jew nose.
Oh, your hair would look so good if it was straight.
Jews are so cheap. Why are you so cheap?
Do you speak good English?
How are you an Iraqi Jew?
I think the person saying microaggression kind of doesn't really think about it.
This person who said it was my friend, and I was astonished that they would say something like that.
You don't want to make a big deal about it, but then it's also you just said something that offended me, so I feel like I should speak up.
Because they're micro, because they're very subtle, they're small, you feel like you don't have a reason to be upset. You're overreacting, and people even can make you feel that way when you bring it up. They're like, oh, you can't take a joke.
You're making too big of a deal of this. Why are you overreacting?
Don't take it so seriously. It was just a joke. Chill out. Say oh no, I actually love black people. I love people of color. They try to just minimize the situation.
If someone feels hurt by a microaggression, it shouldn't just be pushed to the side.
It definitely has negative impacts and leads to people disliking who they actually are. Those kinds of subtle offensive comments can build up over time, and they can have a deep psychological effect, and they can make you feel bad and they can make you doubt yourself.
We try to just use jokes to make things less awkward or ease social experiences, but it is important because you need to be aware of what you're saying and who you're speaking to.
Think of what you say and how it can affect the person you're saying it to.
Gives you an idea of what microaggressions and what it means to younger people. Usually we think of adults, but this is that particular video really focused on people who are, immigrants or refugees into our country and how they feel when they're mistreated because of what their cultural attire is, or also the words that we use with our younger generation, younger kids, young adults. I think we all could use some of that education on how to not say some of the things that could hurt people, especially when we think we're joking. It's not a joke, it's serious. People get hurt. And it's sometimes those types of and comments are carried out through adulthood. So keep that in mind. Next is, myself. We can go to the next one. We do have another video prior to this one, and this one will kind of give you an idea of what related acts of hate are. So we'll play that video before I talk about the 5 Ds on bystander intervention.
Pandemic. A young woman wearing a mask is attacked in a subway station.
Come here, sanitize your Come here.
An elderly woman is chased by a bully trying to squirt hand sanitizer on her. Harassment and assaults against Asian Americans are up sharply.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19, we have seen an incredibly disturbing, skyrocketing increase in the number of hate crimes, racist attacks, and acts of discrimination against Chinese Americans and Asian Americans.
Kate Jasensky was crossing a street in Madison, Wisconsin, when a woman began screaming at her.
Made eye contact, and she called us like dirty Chinese. She said, "Go back to your effing country." There are a lot of other people there who are watching the situation, and nobody did anything.
Professor Russell Jung helped set up a database tracking hate incidents.
Maybe 75% are name-calling harassments where people are just yelled at and saying, get out of here, you have the coronavirus, to about 15% are actual physical assaults.
President Trump has repeatedly identified COVID-19 as Chinese.
I would like to begin by announcing some important developments in our war against the Chinese virus.
Asian American community leaders say Trump is whipping up hate.
And you can see it in our reporting center when he makes a statement about the Chinese virus. Immediately after, there's an uptick of anger and discrimination against Asian Americans.
Racist attacks and pestilence are linked in history. When the Black Death ravaged Europe in the 14th century, mobs killed thousands of Jews accused of spreading plague. Some of Trump's fellow Republicans, like this Texas senator, blame the virus on Chinese customs.
China is to blame because the culture where people eat bats and snakes and dogs and things like that.
So many of these remarks are based in misunderstanding of facts and science, but also based in xenophobia and racism and a lack of tolerance.
Coronavirus is not the only contagion stalking the U.S. The virus of hate is running rampant, too. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Los Angeles.
Okay. So imagine, we just finished talking about how viruses don't hate and they don't discriminate. Yet we have seen a jump on our Asian community being attacked. And so keep that in mind, which leads me very well into the next PowerPoint that we have available to you. So imagine that you're not being attacked, but you are seeing this occurring. You're watching it unfold, and you feel, first of all, you don't know what to do. You feel helpless, and you kind of just stopped cold in your tracks. And so some of the things that I'm going to talk about is the 5 Ds, like what as a bystander can you do? Because we all play a role when we see discrimination and racism occur, okay? And this I learned through Hollaback webinars. So it's not my own work. I did take it from the Hollaback, and it's really stuck with me. It's something that I've continuously think about, and I've said to other people, and I will continue to do so because I think it's important that we all learn, because nobody learns how to intervene. So in this case, it's the 5 Ds, okay? And it's an easy way to kind of keep some of them in your mind, and to keep to kind of think about them if you don't take anything else from this program. So first one, distraction. Take an indirect approach to de-escalate the situation. Well, what does that mean? Well, it could be that if you are hearing somebody verbally attack another individual for whatever the situation may be. It's because they're being racist, because of their age, gender, nationality, because of their religion. You can always try and distract the individual who's being attacked. So how do you do that? You can talk to the person, maybe even kind of motion them to come towards you and kind of separating them from the individual or individuals who are attacking that person. Delegating. Well, what does delegate mean? I mean, delegate means that you ask somebody to do something, right? But you can't do that when you see a situation that is unfolding before you. You can't say, you, come and help me. No, you try to be really cool about it and keep very calm about it and say, you know what, would you mind helping me walk this individual to a place, or, try to bring another individual into the conversation, because they might also feel uncomfortable intervening. And so what a better way to kind of just slowly and calmly asking somebody for help, but in a way that is not so obvious. And, sometimes when groups of people are together, you start, including other people in that conversation. That's kind of what you do, kind of saying, you know what, let's have this conversation on this side without being so obvious. The third one, delay. After the incident is over, check in with the person who was harassed. So, this reminds me of like a car accident. When you've had a car accident and people just kind of drive by, nobody ever really stops by and say, hey, are you okay? Someone might, but especially if you're in a busy street and it's been a pretty horrific car accident, very rarely do you have somebody just come over and say, hey, are you okay? It's the same thing in this kind of a situation. Take the time to ask that person, are you okay? They might not be able to speak. They might not be able to think. Maybe they need to call a relative or a friend because they're so shook up about the incident. Maybe they need a ride, and hopefully you'd be willing to stay with them until, one, the police shows up, or two, the people have left that individual alone, and three, just to kind of help them, calm them down and let them gather themselves so they can think. Because this is, unless it's happened to you, this is very traumatic. You end up not knowing which direction to go to. So if you can delay it, great, so that person can gather themselves again. Direct. So the other thing is that even though we want to intervene, and we can't always necessarily intervene physically, but you can certainly intervene verbally, but also you have to assess your safety. So yes, speak up about the harassment, about the racism, and be firm and clear, but also make sure that you're aware of what your safety is. So, not allowing the situation back you up in a corner per se. If you feel like you're being cornered physically, then immediately asking for that help, whether it's calling the police or, having other people come in and help you to get out of that situation, but always with the idea that you remain calm, because there's nothing worse than when people start getting very upset and loud, and that's where aggressions come in. And so if you yourself can think, okay, I need to remain calm and try to direct yourself for your safety and the person who's being harassed, that is a way to do it. Okay, then document. Now, nowadays we all have cell phones. It seems like we all are phone happy. Sometimes it's not always readily available because the incident, it gets very intense. But if you are with another individual, or if other people are there that are not aggressors, then by all means ask, hey, somebody should be videotaping this. And it is helpful to videotape the individuals who are targeting, because it seems very clear, and it seems like it works every time, that when you document something, it speaks 1,000 words versus just saying what the incident was. Okay, there's proof, there is something very concrete, and you have it, and this might even help the individual later on to try and kind of go through the grieving process of going through such a horrific incident, and knowing that, there was somebody there to help them. I really like the way these 5 Ds are explained, because they're simple, they're direct, And more than anything, it is something that we can all do instead of just being a bystander without intervening. I think we all should, and it's our duty to not just stand by, but to try and intervene, but always in a safe way. Now, with this being said, we do have a quick video on a bystander intervention, so you have a better idea, a better outlook as to what that means, because I'm explaining it, but there's nothing more like actually seeing it. So the next video we have is that bystander intervention.
It's not okay.
No, no, stop, no. No, stop, no.
Whoa. Thank you. That was a great video. You know, you don't always have to necessarily talk, but doing subtle things to intervene between individuals, it's a great way of being a bystander and intervening without necessarily saying a whole lot to the aggressors. So with our next PowerPoint, Lee. Hello. So next will be Mindy Rush Shipman, the director of the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights. And this is a great way to kind of bring everything together. What can we do and how can we report these incidences? So Mindy, if you could please talk a little bit about this, we'd so appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Francisca. So as the last D in the 5 Ds points out, is when we see something and when we observe something, or even when something happens to us, it's really important to document what happened. Regardless of whether you think it's an illegal act, a criminal act, or if it's just a purely racist incident that might not violate a particular law, you don't have to determine that. But regardless, it's important to document it. So what the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights and collaboration with the Asian Community and Cultural Center and El Centro has done is we've put together a very simple reporting mechanism that's available in multiple languages, including English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, and Arabic. And it walks an individual who's experienced discrimination or microaggression or hate or even a hate crime, or a bystander who's witnessed that, into answering a few questions to make sure that the incident is properly documented. Francisca did mention that if someone is able to capture the incident on an audio recording or even a video recording, that would be really helpful. This COVID-19 racism incident report that I'm talking about even allows an opportunity for you to upload that video to preserve the video. This incident report is easily found on the Commission on Human Rights website. It's humanrights.lincoln.ne.gov, and that website is going to be listed at the end of this program, so you can jot that down. And again, it can be accessed by anyone. So if the discrimination or the instance of hate didn't happen to you, but you witnessed it, we still encourage you to report on this form. Everything that you report on the form is confidential. What that means is the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights is not going to release this information, including your identifiable information, to any other agency without your permission. Now, of course, we'll reach out, and if you would like assistance navigating filing a discrimination complaint with our office or contacting law enforcement, we can walk you through that process and provide you support through that process. But if that's not the route that you want to go, we'll respect that. But it's still important to document the incident so that way we know what's happening in our own community. I think it's also important for anybody that provides services to know about this form. Sometimes the community members that we're working with tell us things that have happened to them that sometimes sounds unbelievable or sometimes is all too common. And as a service provider, we don't know what to do. This is one tool that you can have in your tool belt to document those incidents and potentially get further assistance for the community member that you're working with. If we go to the next slide, this is really just wrapping up the entire PowerPoint presentation and reiterating the steps that you can take to fight racism, microaggressions, discrimination, or hate crimes that are happening across the nation, but also here in our own community. The first is, if you know of the incident that's occurring, report it or encourage the person to report it. And again, using that COVID-19 reporting form is a great choice, or simply calling or emailing the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights is another option, and our contact information will be at the end of this presentation. Also, don't forget about the 5 Ds. Utilize that bystander intervention skills, and the more that you practice these skills, the more that you go through them in your head, the more likely you'll be able to utilize them when you're placed in a situation where you're actually witnessing these acts. Continue to educate yourself and others about race equity and anti-racism. This is ever so important. And in conjunction with providing yourself that and others that education, we also ask that you support community organizations and movements that fight racism and empower our community members. Although we started preparing for this presentation kind of at the inception of the COVID-19 pandemic, these acts are even more important now. We recognize the Black Lives Matters movement, and our next webinar, we're going to be partnering with the Malone Center and the Ponca Tribe. And the presentation after that, we're going to be partnering with the Good Neighbor Center and the Indian Center. And we're going to continue to reiterate these steps that you can take in the fight against discrimination and racism and xenophobia. Because like I said, the more you know, the more you practice, the easier it is to engage in these behaviors.
Thank you, Mindy. I think we're done with our PowerPoint. Okay. So as we're kind of shifting gears here a little bit, you know, I do want to thank the presenters, the Asian Community Cultural Center, El Centro de las Americas, and to Mindy, our director of the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights, because the information that we've provided to you today is important. And like Mindy just stated, you know, it's important that we continue to educate ourselves it's important for us to continue to educate ourselves, our community, and definitely we will be continuing this conversation in the 2 other phases, and we will let the community know when it'll come, when we will have those webinars again. So then next, we have Mindy again, because she is just so knowledgeable, and she's awesome when it comes talking about what our commission, the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights, has to offer to our community. And so she will be talking about the importance of the fair housing as a resource that we can use. And then again, all of those numbers will be at the end of this program. We will have them at the end. And if anybody really would like to have a copy of this PowerPoint, please do let us know. If anybody has questions, we encourage you to send those questions on Facebook Live. And at the end, we will have a quick Q&A and go from there. So next, Mindy will be talking briefly about fair housing as a resource.
Thank you, Francisca. Thanks for giving me just a little bit more time to talk in detail about COVID-19 related discrimination that's happening in housing and how it can affect community members here in Lincoln. So there are laws that protect community members from housing discrimination, and those laws, as well as the agencies that enforce those laws, including the Commission, are increasingly more important during public health emergencies. So in particular, the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights is really trying to work better to understand and address the fair housing impacts that COVID-19 is having in our community. As far as housing goes, we know that community members are finding it difficult to secure and maintain safe housing during the pandemic. We also know that community members have continued to be evicted from their homes the past several months, also during the pandemic. If somebody's facing housing insecurity, it's really important to obtain legal advice regarding Nebraska's Landlord-Tenant Act. The Legal Aid of Nebraska or the Tenants Assistance Project that is led by the Volunteer Lawyers Project are 2 really great resources to help with the eviction defense process in the court. But in addition to that, we are also encouraging everyone to obtain information and assistance regarding your fair housing rights under local, state, and federal laws. Fair housing, it protects you if you're infected with COVID-19, or if you're perceived to be infected with COVID-19, or if you're profiled on the basis of one of your protected characteristics to be associated with the virus in some way. So some examples. It is illegal to deny you housing or shelter, to harass you, or to try to evict you from your house if you're from a country that has been affected by COVID-19, or if you're perceived to have been from that country. So like Sheila and Romeo went into a lot of details. There's a lot of misinformation and judgment and racism and xenophobia towards folks that are of East Asian descent or appear to be. And if you are treated differently in your housing because of that, it's illegal, and you need to be contacting the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights to enforce your fair housing rights against treatment. We also talked about how it's illegal for your landlord to sexually harass you or to suggest that you engage in sexual acts or favors in lieu of rent. We all know that our community members are struggling to make their rent obligations, and scrupulous housing providers across the nation have tried to take advantage of people's vulnerability right now, and it's illegal, regardless of your gender or whether you're binary or non-binary. If your landlord is attempting to take advantage of you, it's illegal and it needs to be reported immediately. Fair housing laws also protect folks with disabilities or folks that are regarded as having disabilities. So we all know that persons in our community that are living with disabilities, including just underlying health conditions that require them to take medications every day, are more vulnerable to the severity of complications if they contract COVID-19. As such, folks living with disabilities have the right to reasonable accommodations to remain safely in their homes. and their housing providers have an obligation under the Fair Housing Act to engage in the interactive process to make sure that tenants with disabilities are protected. If that's not happening, or if you need assistance in making those reasonable accommodation requests, that's what the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights is here for. And we're also going to be providing information about the Fair Housing Center of Nebraska and Iowa at the end of this program for specific advocacy regarding your fair housing rights. So remember, you do not have to know all the specifics that I just said. It's a very complex area of law, but what you should remember is that if you feel like something's not right, if you feel like you're being treated differently by your landlord or your housing provider, contact us.
Thank you, Mindy. And, you know, there is a lot of information out there, and we definitely don't want to bombard you, but it is important that we continuously remind you of what resources are available to you, to the community. That's what this is about. And please, if you have questions, ask. I think it's important that no question is dumb. It's a dumb question. I've heard that quite a bit in the last few days. If we don't continue to educate ourselves, the community, then we will never know. And it's okay to say you don't know. I think that is important because sometimes we are so caught up in thinking that we need to know everything. That is not so. That is why our office exists in part, is to continuously educate our community members, and anybody who wants to learn more. We do offer those educational and, you know, we do offer education, informational sessions. Just let us know, please. So the one person I have not introduced because it's been, I wanted to kind of be a little surprised towards the end. This gentleman was so kind to jump in and say, yes, I will be there. Councilman Benny Schob is with us today, and he's going to talk a little bit more about that hate intimidation ordinance that was passed by our city council. And I think it's important that we know what that entails. He has taken time from his busy schedule to be with us today and talk about it and give us really the ins and outs of it, what that means for us. So, because a lot of people, I think, are apprehensive about this ordinance, but the reality is it's for the protection not just of some people, but all of us in our community. So here today with us is Benny Schob. Thank you so much, Benny.
Thank you, Francisca, for that introduction. I have enjoyed all the presenters so far. Thank you all for taking the time to present. I'm going to take the PowerPoint slides and share them with others, if you don't mind. There's some really good stuff there. But I'm going to take a couple minutes to talk about City Council. On June 15th, we passed 20-71, which is a new ordinance. It's a hate intimidation ordinance. It adds to our existing city code. Many of you know that our city code is divided into 28 sections, which we call titles. Each one of those titles addresses a different aspect of our city operations and how we interact and get things done. Title 9 is the title that we added a new section to, and Title 9 is titled Peace, Public Peace and Welfare. And the new ordinance that we added was 9-5- I forget the other number, hang on. 9.05.010, and it's titled a hate intimidation ordinance. And I'd like to take a moment to read that so we get it. A person who violates another section of Title 9 with the intent to intimidate a person or persons in whole or in part because of an actual or perceived race, color, religion, physical or mental disability, national origin, age, ancestry, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, or of the other person or persons is guilty of a separate offense of hate intimidation. We passed this on the 15th of June with a 7-0 vote. All city council people were in favor of this. What this actually does is add a second law to our code. If a person is convicted of a discriminatory act, which is a crime against an individual, we can assess a second penalty to that act and that person, which we call a hate intimidation, based on the things I just read. our code already exists and there's already a camera in place. And if there's evidence of that, the second ordinance would be applied, an additional penalty, additional time. This is not a hate speech ordinance. This is not going to be a standalone ordinance. There has to be an act and evidence to support it. Having said that, I want to backtrack to something that Mindy and Francisca said earlier. What this is designed to do is to educate the public, both that we don't appreciate that act and that you as a victim have additional options and additional rights. Something that has been several times, if you feel like you're the victim of discrimination or feel that you're being intimidated, call the Human Rights Commission, report that act, give our agencies a chance to investigate and look into the evidence. Don't say, well, I don't know. Ask the questions. We will be happy to help you. And if there is, law enforcement will act and we will do something to tell our community that this is not where we want to be. We do not want hate in our state. This new law was passed on the 15th. It's on the books now, and we will be enforcing it on an as-needed basis. I think that's all I really need to say. I'm excited that we all agreed, all the city council agreed, that this is something we want our community to take a stand on.
Thank you so much, Benny. We appreciate it. It's great. I mean, what a way to explain it in a more layman terms. So those of us who don't know much about the ordinance realize that this is not, to muzzle people, to kind of tell them you can't say anything. No, it's, again, educating ourselves. If you have questions, we do have our council. Our city council, ask, call our office and ask. And that's what this webinar was about. It's about educating, not just ourselves, but you, those around us. This is why it's so important that we continue this conversation in this community, because we are so diverse and we are continuously growing, and we're going to continue to grow. And while we're going through those growing pains, we want to be a part of the solution, and we want to be a part of the continuation of the education. It all comes down to that education. We were looking to see if anybody had any questions, and we have not had any, but if you don't have them, that's okay. You will have at the end of this program all of contact information, phone numbers. Now you know a way to report any incidences of discrimination, sexual harassment. We really didn't touch on that because we wanted to make sure we talked more about what was the discrimination within the Asian and Hispanic communities, but we also do investigate sexual harassment, and we want to make sure that everyone knows that you all have rights, regardless of race and everything else that comes after that. That's what our office does. That's what the community centers do. That's what Councilman Benny Shobe does, is, he is our council person. And so please use us as your resources. So with that being said, I want to thank each and one of our participants. I have enjoyed being here together with them and presenting to all of you out there in Facebook media. You never know who exactly is going to be watching, but we feel strongly about this, and we will continue to bring you our work so you can see us. And we will continue to push this out. As soon as we have a date for the next ones, we will let you know. So again, thanks everyone for joining us, our speakers for joining us during their busy schedules. It's been incredible. And remember, we all have rights.